if a child, accidentally puts their hand on a hot stove, your immediate instinct is to pull their hand away.
Right.
You just remove them from the source of the pain.
Right. I mean, it's a basic biological reaction.
Exactly. So if you find out that a teenager in your life is being relentlessly tormented on their smartphone, your first instinct as a protector is probably the exact same thing. You just take the phone away.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Pull their hand off that digital stove. But, well, according to the latest research on youth psychology, doing that is actually one of the most dangerous things you could possibly do.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds entirely backwards to the adult brain. But when you look at how modern digital social ecosystems actually function for youth, taking that device away doesn't remove the burn. It actually it locks them in the oven.
That concept completely flipped my understanding of this issue on its head. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're not just talking about the basic fact that cyberbullying exists. You already know that.
Right, everyone knows it's out there.
Yeah. Instead, we're decoding this massive newly released guide that completely redefines how we identify and respond to digital distress.
It's a total paradigm shift.
It really is. I mean, picture this scenario. You're at the dinner table, right? You ask your kid how their day was, and you get that classic flat one-word answer, fine.
We've all been there.
Right? But they've been retreating to their room earlier than usual. And, they physically flinch when their phone buzzes. You're sitting there wondering, is this just standard teenage moodiness, or is there a crisis playing out invisibly right in front of me?
And the scary part is that invisible crisis is happening way more often than we want to admit.
Oh, totally. If
you look at recent national surveys, they show that 46% of U.S. teens, so ages 13 to 17, have experienced cyberbullying.
46%, that's almost half.
Almost half. But the piece of data that really frames our entire conversation today comes from the latest research tracking how kids actually respond. Out of all those kids experiencing digital harassment, only 1 in 10 ever tells a parent or a trusted adult.
Wow. Just 1 in 10.
Yeah.
That means 90% of this trauma is being processed in, total isolation. So my immediate question is, why?
Yeah.
If they're in that much pain, why is the silence so universal?
Well, it comes down to a highly calculated survival strategy on their part. The data shows that this silence is driven by 3 compounding fears.
Okay, what's the first one?
First is the fear we just talked about, that you will confiscate their device, which to them equals total social exile.
Right, the hot stove thing.
Exactly. Second, they fear adults will minimize the pain, that you'll tell them to just, log off, or that they're overreacting.
Ooh, yeah. I can see how that would shut a kid down.
And third, they are terrified of escalation. There's this really pervasive belief that if an adult intervenes, the bully will find out they reported it, and the social retaliation will be absolutely ruthless.
Okay, let's unpack this idea of overreacting, because some of the fascinating new psychological research we're looking at highlights something incredible about how that pain manifests. And it completely depends on the age of the child.
Yes, the developmental divide. It's the master key to this whole guide.
Because it seems like a 10-year-old processes this digital trauma in a completely different universe than a 16-year-old.
Oh, entirely. You just cannot look for the same clues in a 6th grader that you look for in a high school junior. Their brains literally lack the same neurological architecture.
Right. I was trying to visualize this, and the best analogy I could come up with is, well, it's like the difference between a toddler dropping an ice cream cone on the sidewalk versus an adult getting a massive, unexpected tax bill in the mail.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Because, when the toddler drops the ice cream, the devastation is instant. It is physical, and it is loud. The whole neighborhood hears about it.
They absolutely do.
But when the adult opens that tax bill, they don't scream. They just fold the paper, put it in their pocket, and sit quietly at their desk for 3 weeks, just internalizing the stress.
That is so true.
But looking at the research, I have to ask, is it simply that younger kids haven't learned social grace yet? Are they just bad at hiding things?
It's much more profound than just learning social grace. It's about the physical development of the prefrontal cortex.
Which does what, exactly?
That's the part of the brain responsible for compartmentalizing and regulating emotion. In a 10 to 13-year-old, that area is highly underdeveloped.
So they just can't handle the overflow.
Exactly. When they experience extreme distress online, they experience emotional flooding. The anxiety literally overflows into their physical environment.
And the older teens.
Older teens have developed enough cognitive control to mask the immediate reaction. They know how you will react, so they artificially suppress the dropped ice cream cone, acting like they just got a tax bill.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's start by looking closely at those younger kids, right? The 10 to 13 demographic. The guide refers to them as the overt reactors.
Yes. We aren't looking for subtle psychological shifts here. We are looking for massive behavioral leaks.
And the first major red flag is a sudden, sharp reluctance to use their devices.
Right. And to understand why this is such a powerful indicator, you have to look at it through the lens of Pavlovian conditioning.
Like ringing a bell for a dog.
Pretty much. For a tween, a tablet or a smartphone is essentially a dopamine dispenser. It's games, it's funny videos, it's connection.
Right, they usually can't put it down.
Exactly. So if a child suddenly starts making excuses to avoid their previously favorite device, claiming they are like bored of Roblox or they don't want to watch YouTube, it means the conditioning has flipped.
Oh.
The device is transformed from a source of dopamine to a trigger for cortisol. It is now a physical threat.
And when they are forced to interact with that threat, you get the second major leak, which is massive emotional outbursts.
Yeah, the flooding.
We're talking about a kid checking a text message, and like within 30 seconds, they are crying, slamming doors, or picking a fight with their little brother.
Right. It's that lack of compartmentalization we talked about. A 12-year-old cannot separate the digital insult from the physical room they are standing in.
So it feels real and present to them.
Very much so. If someone is cruel to them on a server, the threat feels like it is physically inside their bedroom. The boundary between the screen and real life simply doesn't exist yet in their neural pathways.
Which obviously spills over into how they talk about their real-world friendships. We see a drastic shift in their language. They make these sweeping, catastrophic statements like, "Nobody in the whole school likes me."
Yeah, that's the egocentrism of early adolescence at work. Their worldview is very tight.
How so?
Well, if 3 influential kids in a group chat turn against them, their brain doesn't say, oh, 3 specific people are being mean. Their brain scales that rejection up to encompass their entire existence.
Because their world is so small.
Exactly. Recent risk surveys point out that over 22% of middle school girls experience this kind of electronic bullying, and the sheer velocity of that group rejection is what drives those catastrophic statements.
Now, here's where I want to push back on the guide a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
One of the behaviors it highlights for this tween age group is suddenly deleting apps without any explanation. Like an app just vanishes from their phone.
Right.
Now, if I see a 12-year-old getting bullied on a platform and they voluntarily choose to delete the app, shouldn't we be throwing a parade for that kid? I mean, isn't that a massive win for healthy boundary setting and self-regulation?
I completely understand why it looks that way to an adult. It totally looks like a mature, proactive choice. But the research shows the motivation is entirely different.
Really?
Yeah, it is not healthy boundary setting at all. It is sheer panic. It's a desperate, flailing attempt to amputate the source of the pain.
So it's not a strategic retreat. It's more like jumping out of a moving car.
Precisely. And the tragic part is the tween fundamentally misunderstands the architecture of the internet.
What do you mean?
They think deleting the specific app deletes the bully. They don't realize the bully will just move to iMessage or Snapchat or just confront them at their locker the next morning.
Oh, man. That is so sad.
Yeah. They apply a localized technical fix to a systemic social disease. So when the bullying continues anyway, their sense of helplessness just multiplies exponentially.
Wow. They think they've found the escape hatch and it just leads to a smaller room.
Exactly.
And that sustained helplessness translates directly into the body. Like, this isn't just in their heads anymore. The guide cites sleep studies showing these kids have a 47% increase in sleep disruptions.
Yes.
Nightmares, refusing to sleep alone. And health data reports a huge spike in psychosomatic complaints, specifically stomach aches right before school.
This is such a crucial point regarding the mind-body connection.
Yeah.
We often dismiss a Tuesday morning stomach ache as a kid, just faking it to get out of a math test.
Right, the classic, my tummy hurts excuse.
But the anxiety of having to physically face the peers who tormented them online triggers a legitimate autonomic nervous system response. The fight or flight mechanism kicks in, blood rushes away from the digestive tract, and their stomach genuinely, physically hurts.
So the pain is real, even if the origin is psychological.
100%.
And if that nervous system overload goes on long enough, you hit the most extreme tween reaction, which is behavioral regression. We're talking about 10 or 11-year-olds suddenly wetting the bed, thumb-sucking, or exhibiting severe separation anxiety.
Regression is basically the brain's ultimate emergency brake.
How does that work?
Well, when the current developmental reality becomes too complex and painful to process, the nervous system physically rewires itself. It retreats to an earlier developmental stage where the child felt universally safe and cared for.
Oh, wow.
So if you see a sudden tech aversion combined with regression, it is an absolute siren warning that something catastrophic is happening in their digital world.
Okay, so that is the tween reality. It's loud, it's physical, it overflows. But as these kids cross the threshold into high school, those overt leaks dry up. We move into the ages of 14 to 17.
The master maskers.
The master maskers. And I imagine this requires a completely different kind of vigilance from the adults around them.
It really does, because older teens are incredibly sophisticated social strategists. They are hyper-aware of adult observation.
So they know we're watching.
Yes. They know exactly what behaviors will trigger an intervention, and they actively work to suppress those triggers. You aren't looking for the explosion anymore. You are looking for the void.
The void. I really like that phrasing.
Yeah.
Because the first sign of this age group is a sudden, impenetrable secrecy.
Right.
And I know it's completely normal for a 15-year-old to want privacy. You knock on a teenager's door. That's just basic respect. But the guide emphasizes a rapid baseline shift.
Exactly. Going from normal privacy to creating fake accounts, using hidden vault apps, or executing that lightning fast screen swipe the millisecond you walk into the living room.
Right. It's the abruptness of the shift that matters.
Yeah.
And they're hiding evidence, not just seeking autonomy.
Yes. And intertwined with that secrecy is how they physically react to the device itself.
With the younger kids, we saw them avoid the tablet completely.
But with older teens, it manifests as notification anxiety.
I was trying to wrap my head around this, and rather than a haunted house where something jumps out at you, it feels much more like dark Pavlovian conditioning.
That's a great way to put it.
They've been wired to view a harmless chime or a vibration in their pocket, not as a friend reaching out, but as the footstep of a predator.
That's a very accurate psychological model, and the hypervigilance is exhausting for them.
So what does that look like?
You might see them physically flinch when the phone buzzes, or conversely, you might see them stare blankly at a vibrating phone on the table, just deliberately refusing to turn it over. Both the hyperfixation and the total avoidance are textbook trauma responses.
And while they are battling this private trauma response, their real-world social structures are often collapsing. The data points out a terrifying metric. 34% of teen cyberbullying occurs entirely within group chats.
And we really have to understand the specific velocity of group chat bullying.
What makes it so different?
On a physical playground, bullying is contained by time and geography. It ends when the bell rings. But in a group chat, the harassment is 247, the audience is infinite, and the exclusion is mathematically visible.
Mathematically visible? You mean like seeing that you were kicked out?
Exactly. You can physically see that you were removed from the chat. And from an evolutionary psychology standpoint, peer acceptance is survival for an adolescent.
Right.
Being exiled from the central group chat isn't just mean. It is interpreted by the teenage brain as actual social death.
And when you were actively fighting off social death, I imagine your AP history homework doesn't really register.
Not at all.
Which explains the academic decline. Academic health journals show bullied teens suffer an average GPA drop of half a point. Not because they got lazy, but because their cognitive bandwidth is entirely consumed by threat assessment.
You just cannot memorize historical dates when your amygdala is scanning the room for the people who are currently destroying your reputation online. The cognitive load is simply too heavy.
This leads to a phenomenon that I found particularly tragic. Digital shrinkage.
Yes.
It's when a teenager will literally quit a real-world activity they love just to avoid the people bullying them online. You have a kid who has played varsity soccer for 3 years, loves the sport, and suddenly they just quit.
It's a spatial association problem. The teenager maps the digital threat onto physical geography.
So the spaces get ruined too.
Right. If the girls mocking her online are also in the locker room becomes a contaminated space. They systematically shrink their physical world to minimize their exposure to the digital bullies.
And the stress of that shrinking world causes profound biological changes. Psychological experts link this specific type of digital harassment to massive fluctuations in appetite, either starving or binging, and severe sleep disorders,
We see a lot of hypersomnia here.
where they sleep too much.
Yes. A teenager will start sleeping 14 hours a day just to shut consciousness off. It is the ultimate avoidance strategy.
Which brings us to the most critical juncture of masking phase. Because teenagers lack long-term perspective, they view their current social reputation as permanent.
Exactly.
When adults experience a setback, we know time heals. But when a teenager has embarrassing rumors or private photos leaked, they believe their life is irreversibly ruined. The damage feels catastrophic and permanent.
Which leads to expressions of hopelessness. Things like, there is no point anymore, or I just want it to stop.
And I want to be incredibly clear with the listeners right now. The public health data shows that cyberbullied teens are nearly twice as likely to attempt suicide. This isn't hyperbole.
No, it is an absolute crisis. Any hint of permanent hopelessness from a teenager must be treated as an immediate emergency.
I want to pause the analysis for just a second. If you are listening to this and you recognize these final signs in a child in your life, you do not have to handle it alone. The Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available 24/7. You can call or text 988.
It's completely free.
Yes. You can also reach the crisis text line by texting the word HOME to 741-741. Both are free, confidential, and always open.
Knowing the signs, whether it's the overt overflow of a tween or the masked void of a teen, is essential. But awareness without action is practically useless. We have to pivot to the protocol.
Yes. Let's get into the parent's playbook. The tactical execution of what to do, and maybe more importantly, what absolutely never to do.
Right.
The guide starts with step 1, the conversation. And it is extremely strict about the approach. You do not walk into their room, sit on the edge of the bed, and bluntly ask, are you being bullied online?
Because a direct interrogative question will almost universally trigger a direct defensive denial. You are activating their shame response.
So what's the better way?
The research found that teens are 3 times more likely to disclose abuse if the conversation feels observational rather than accusatory. You have to lower the stakes.
Give me an example.
Say something like, hey, I've noticed you seem really tense after checking your phone lately. I'm not mad. I just want to understand what's taking up so much of your energy.
You have to prove to them that honesty won't result in punishment. Which actually brings us back to my very first question of this deep dive, the hot stove.
Yes. The phone.
I'm still struggling to understand why we shouldn't take the phone away. If the phone is the weapon the bullies are using, isn't taking it away the only way to disarm them?
I know it defies every parental instinct you have, but you have to view the device through the teenager's eyes. The smartphone is not just the conduit for the bullying, it is also their only lifeline to the friends who actually support them. It is their entire social infrastructure.
So by confiscating the phone, I'm not just locking out the bullies, I'm locking out their best friend, their support system, their entire social safety net.
Exactly. When you take the phone, you are unintentionally punishing the victim. You isolate them completely. Furthermore, you validate their deepest fear, the exact fear that kept them silent in the first place. You teach them that coming to an adult with a digital problem results in digital exile. They will learn to never, ever tell you anything again.
That is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
You aren't removing them from the fire, you are putting them in solitary confinement. Okay, so if we leave the phone in their hands, what is the actual tactical response?
Step 3 is aggressive documentation.
Documentation.
Yes. Before you block a single account, before you report or delete a single hateful comment, you must capture the evidence. You take screenshots of everything.
So don't just delete and ignore.
Right. You record timestamps, usernames, platform URLs, and the specific nature of the threats. The guide highly recommends creating an isolated evidence vault.
Like a separate folder on your computer.
Exactly. A separate digital folder where you compile this data objectively.
Because you're building a case file, which sets up step 4, escalation. The guide outlines a clear ladder here. You report the accounts to the platform safety team first.
Yes.
Then you take the evidence vault to the school administrators. And you do it in writing to create a paper trail.
That paper trail is key.
And crucially, if there are direct threats of physical violence, sexual exploitation, or sustained stalking, you bypass the school entirely and go straight to law enforcement.
And it's vital for parents to know their leverage here. Every single one of the 50 states now has specific cyberbullying laws on the books.
Really? All 50?
All 50. So when you have concrete documentation, you instantly transform a messy he said, she said teenage drama into an actionable legal file. You shift the power dynamic right back to the victim.
Okay, let's take a breath and synthesize this. We've completely reframed how this digital trauma operates.
We really have.
We've moved away from the basic idea of kids being mean and uncovered the neurobiology of why a 10-year-old unformed prefrontal cortex causes them to overflow with physical stomach aches and regressive behavior.
Right.
While a 16-year-old's sophisticated brain allows them to mask the trauma, shrinking their real-world lives and internalizing the devastation, we've learned that the instinct to take the phone away is essentially a trap, and that observational empathy and ruthless documentation are the actual tools for survival.
The through line of all this research is that the digital world requires an entirely new framework of adult empathy.
It really does. And the guide closes with a rallying cry that I think every listener needs to internalize. You are not powerless, and neither is the child in your life. Believing their pain, even when you can't physically see the bruises, is the very first step to getting their power back.
It absolutely is. And, as we conclude, I really want to leave you with a more philosophical question to chew on.
Oh, I like those. Lay it on us.
Well, we've spent this entire time analyzing the developmental stages of children and how that dictates their reaction to digital stress. But what about our developmental stage?
What do you mean?
Like, how much does our own deep underlying nostalgia for a pre-digital 1990s childhood blind us to the reality of what these kids are facing?
Oh, wow.
Do we unconsciously dismiss the severity of their pain because deep down we still believe that what happens on a screen isn't real life? Because to a modern teenager, their digital ecosystem isn't just a distraction from the real world, it is the primary world they inhabit.
That is exactly the paradigm shift we need. If we keep pretending the digital world is just a game, we are going to keep missing the very real injuries they are sustaining inside of it.
Absolutely.
The next time you ask them how their day was, remember that the physical room you were sitting in isn't the only room they've been living in that day. Keep your eyes open, look for the leaks, and never stop connecting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on this